Well, ladies and gentlemen, my name's David Edward. I was a member of the council of the RSE. Now my great pleasure to introduce our speaker for this evening, Professor Fred Freeman, who is a Professor of Scottish Music at the Royal Conservatoire of Music. He's a graduate of Aberdeen and Edinburgh and a senior associate member of St Anthony's College, Oxford. He's currently, as I've said, Professor of Scottish Music at the Conservatoire. He's the author of books on 18th century poets, Robert Fergusson and Robert Tannahill, and he's published over 100 articles on Scottish literature, folk music, and history. And over the past decade, he's drawn on his extensive musical background to produce 46 CDs. I'm instructed they are internationally acclaimed. And amongst them are the complete songs of Robert Burns, 12 volumes by Lynn Records, All the Bairns o' Adam, a tribute to Hamish Henderson, and the complete songs of Robert Tannahill, 3 volumes to date, Brechin All Records. And this year he was formally recognised by the Association for Scottish Literary Studies with a lifetime honorary fellowship for his outstanding contribution to Scottish music and literature. So with that, I hand over the dais, invite you to listen to the lecture, and I'll sit down.
Thank you very much for that. It's a privilege to speak in this august setting with the spirits of Hume and Watt hovering, no doubt, about the building. Particular privilege to speak about one of the greatest songwriters and poets of all times, Robert Burns. From his own point of view, Robert Burness, or Robert Burns, depending upon your point of view. J.C. Friedrich von Schiller, über naive und sentimentalische Dichtung, poetry. Schiller, German poet, philosopher, exact contemporary of Burns, writing in 1795, distinguishes between 2 types of poets. Those who are not conscious of any rift between themselves and their milieu, and those who are so conscious. For the first, art is a natural form of expression. They see what they see directly and seek to articulate it for its own sake. That's a paraphrase of Schiller by Isaiah Berlin. To quote Schiller himself, for the direct artist, the object possesses him entirely. He is his work, for the work is himself. Dumfries, April 1791, Burns writing to Charles Sharp, who happens to be a fiddler. He affirms, I am a fiddler and a poet. Not a poet and a fiddler and a poet. The other day a brother Catgut, a fiddler, gave me a charming Scots air of your composition. Taking up the idea, I've spun it into 3 stanzas enclosed. From the Scots air to the 3 stanzas. From the fiddle tune to the words. Schiller's direct artist in practice. The fiddler as poet. From the tune to the poetry, unlike Schubert, who wrote songs to Goethe's poems, unlike Hugo Wolf, who wrote songs to Heise's poems, with Burns, you always have the music first, from the fiddler to the poet. In modern parlance, Burns is a folkie, constantly on the scrounge for tunes as he moves up and down the country, quote, with my wallet full of ballads and my fiddle case. Arguably, in many respects, he's the founding father of modern folk music. The head of the Irish Folklore Commission said to me he wouldn't have even known the term folk music. That's true, but he did everything that a folkie does. He adapted the modern melodies of his friends like Masterton for Scots song. He adapted other forms of music like Baroque music for his songs. He adapted international folk tunes. Most importantly, he adapted traditional instrumental tunes, fiddle tunes, pipe tunes for Scots song. He is, of course, known for his aphorisms, the best laid schemes of mice and men gang oft a gley. The rank is but the guinea's stamp, the man's the gowd for a' that. But to my mind, the most profound and radical words he ever penned go like this: die, die, da, 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 die, or more properly, the way I actually recorded it.
Oh, come ye, the fechters and our hair, the sheep and me, man, are where ye at the share of moor, or did the battle see, man? I saw the battle sair and chuch and and red, and money shook my head for fear, for sook to hear the thuds and see the clads of lands, free woods and tartan, duds, bagland, the kingdom's three, man. The reed got lads with black cards to meet them when the slum, and they rushed and pushed and blood out gushed and money a book did farm, and the greater gale did on his fells, and what they glanced for 20 miles, they hawked the clans like ninepin cows, hacked and hashed while braids are splashed and through they dashed and hewed and smashed of fame and died a woman. Had you seen the feather bags and skied and tapped and threws, man, when in the teeth they dared wigs and covenant true blues, man, and lines extended long and layers when bayonets our power the tears, and thews and sace and tay the chairs, way healing the wrath, they frayed the sheath through blades of death till little breath, they fled like fricted dows, man, and died.
What exactly is that all about? Avowedly, it's about the chaos of a Jacobite battle at Shirramoor. More than that, it's about the tune. It's about the real. The real being, as Duncan Johnston used to tell me, one of the greatest pipers of the 20th century, an unremitting, breathless tension, a reel just rolls and it doesn't stop, propelling the action of the song forward, giving a cinematic impression of the scene, wholly integral to the meaning of the song. I shall dub this the language of music. The language of music. The medium, the musical form, the reel is the message. What Burns grasped when he bravely argued with George Thompson, his second editor, who brought in several noted classical composers to orchestrate the Burns songs, of the stature of Pleyel and Kozelluch and Karl Maria von Weber and Hummel and Haydn and Beethoven, who expected to be dealing with a mere poet and found themselves lumbered with a veritable Scots fiddler, who constantly tries to get them to listen, for example, quote, to any of our ancient or Scots fiddlers for a better idea of the Scots tradition in music. Like Pleyel, for example. Pleyel was one of the most eminent composers of his day, and Burns insisted, really without any musical credentials whatsoever, just a simple folk fiddler, insisted in a letter to Thompson, 1793, whatever Mr. Pleyel does, let him not alter one iota of the original Scots airs, in the song department, but let our national music preserve its native features. They are, I own, frequently wild and unreducible to the more modern rules, but on that very eccentricity, perhaps, depends a great part of their effect. A prime example of his concerns, the Austrian composers, Pleyel's composition, his failure to appreciate strathspeys, and Burns's fight somewhat sarcastically over the matter. Letter to Thompson, September 1794. Quote, I am sensible that my taste in music must be inelegant and vulgar, because people of undisputed and cultivated taste, he says tongue-in-cheek, can find no merit in many of my favourite tunes. Many of our strathspeys, ancient and modern, give me most exquisite enjoyment, where you and other judges would probably be showing signs of disgust. The classical buffs, as Burns stated, didn't like strathspeys. They didn't understand strathspeys, for strathspeys manifested something that was not prevalent in Western art music for another 50 years at least, called later tempo rubato, the stealing of the beat. the extreme bending of the beat and dramatic spacing between the notes. Something associated later, 50 years later, with Chopin, his mazurkas, where interestingly, he's close to the Polish tradition of dance, the form that he used for these compositions stylistically. Here's an example of a fiddle strathspey, blithe, blithe, and merry. This is the strathspey that Burns would have known and played. And this is what Kozeluch, for example, did with it. Kozeluch being the Czech composer at the Viennese court. Blithe, blithe and merry, a la Kozeluch.
Blithe, blithe and merry was she but and then. Blithe, blithe the beds of and blithe in the turret by up to tea grows ye on yarrow bank the Birkin shore, but Phoebe was upon your last and praise a yarrow ever so.
In stylistic terms, the articulation is too legato, it's too sostenuto, it's too sustained, it's too full of vibrato, so that the actual strathspey form, which is a dance, is lost, has lost that direct expression that Schiller was talking about. Let's hear it, Burns style, from the fiddle to the voice. Wendy Weatherby, who's in the audience, actually singing it on this recording.
Blithe, blithe and merry was she button bane, blithe by the banks o' Inn, and blithe in Glenturret Glen. By Ochtertie a grouse the Eak on Yarra banks the Birkinshaw, but Feemy was upon your last and breeze a yarrow ever so. Blithe, blithe and bonny was she button bane, blithe by the banks o' Inn, and blithe in Glenturret Glen. Her looks were like the fleur in May, her smile was like a summer morn. She tripped by the banks o' Inn as light's a bird upon a thorn. Blithe, blithe and merry was she button bane, blithe by the banks o' Inn, and blithe in Glenturret Glen. Her bonny face it was as meek as ony lamb upon a lea. The evening sun was near so sweet as was the blink of Finney's e'e. Blithe, blithe and merry.
Burns was not happy with the classical composers and their uninformed interventions. As we noticed, they weren't schooled in Scottish strathspeys, slip jigs, double hornpipes, and the like. Worst yet, Kozeluch called Scottish music, quote, une musique barbare, the music of barbarians. In retaliation, in his song Among the Trees, 1787, our fiddler poet refers to the emerging music hall tradition, Kozeluch's tradition, as the, quote, capon craws and queer haw-haws that made our lugs grow eerio. And in fact, notably, in the song, he calls for Neil Gow, the most famous Scots fiddler of the day, whom Burns had met in Dunkeld that very year, to save Scotland from, quote, foreign squeals. Perhaps some would take that statement to be ethnocentric. When Burns, with James Beattie and William Tytler, his colleagues on his other collection of songs, the Scots Musical Museum, strongly inveighed against, quote, warbling, quote, the smothering of words, meaning schmaltzy vibrato and legato articulation of the emerging music hall tradition. They actually were at the centre of a major European debate about 18th century articulation and style. I could argue that debate is still with us, and I'll show you why. The problem was this, and I can demonstrate it simply with two modern performances of Pachelbel's Canon, which is well known. It's a Baroque piece. One, very schmaltzy, smeared, prettified, Burns would have called it. Prettified. It just all is one smeared line. The other, very light, clear, 18th century semi-staccato. Now a canon, this is Pachelbel's Canon, is a Baroque architectural form built up in clearly differentiated pieces, each one of which should speak. That's the nature of the form. That's what a canon is. I'll play my first example, our legato version, which Burns would call prettified. It sounds lovely. It's one of the greatest orchestras on the planet, one of the most famous conductors on the planet, and this is what he does with Pachelbel's Canon. Now, you'll say, what's wrong with that? I'll play another recording by an orchestra that's been considered to be a half-baked orchestra with a conductor who had no reputation at the time, but he certainly knew his 18th century music. Every note speaks. Have a listen to it. This is our 18th century approach, an orchestra that won't even bear comparison with the other one, but listen to our architectural form. Chappie knew exactly what he was doing. Exhilarating. That's an 18th century architectural piece. Every piece speaks, every bit of the form. It's like a bit of Edinburgh 18th century architecture. Symmetrical, balanced. Each piece is there, is prominent. This is what, for example, Leopold Mozart, Mozart's dad, had to say in considering 18th century music. Quote, "There are some players who tremble at every note as if they had a chronic fever. One should use the tremolo, the vibrato, sparingly, for they found it muddied the melodic line, destroyed the lightness and clarity of 18th century music. In a broad context, let's call this Burns' second complaint, a very European complaint against the classical buffs, and he's in good company. It's why Glenn Gould, the great exponent of Bach, in the 20th century, in endeavouring to do justice to Bach, stopped using the sustaining pedal on the piano because it smeared the melodic line and developed a lighter, semi-staccato articulation, which if you don't know it, I'll play just a snippet of it to give you an idea. Semi-staccatos. It's not a mile from what I recorded with John Nicol in a jig called The Tailor. Listen to the semi-staccatos. Same concept of 18th century music.
The tailor fell through the bed, the Melinda. The tailor fell through the bed, the Melinda. The blankets were thin and the sheets were small. The tailor fell through the bed, the Melinda. The sleepy bit lassie, she treated me ill. The sleepy bit lassie, she treated me ill. The weather was cold and the lassie lay still. She thought that the tailor could dare me ill.
Semi-staccatos. 18th century music. Burns' third complaint about the classical composers was social. He's a fiddler working in an oral tradition. Most of his songs and background, many of them came from his mum and Betty Davidson. He worked within a rural society without a sense of distance between himself and his community. He speaks Scots with the same voice as the folk he describes in his songs. He has the same, to use another German word, Weltanschauung, worldview, the same music, the same humour, the same traditions. So a la Schiller, quote, there's no rift between himself and his milieu. Take a song that is very well known, Duncan Gray. It's a daft song about a wild, randy lassie who has a bairn out of wedlock, and she's not exactly repentant. Burns said the song was, quote, a light horse gallop of a reel being an unremitting, breathless tension, reflecting the rising randiness of the lassie. He says, secondly, the ludicrous is its ruling feature. It's a good loch. It's a good laugh for a rural community, including Burns, suffering the strains of Kirk repression and taboos. In other words, the song bodies forth the wit, humour, satirical thrust of his community. But just look at the contrast between Beethoven's orchestration of Duncan Gray and Burns's. Start with Beethoven. This is Beethoven doing Burns's Duncan Gray.
Duncan Gray, come here, take the blowing note. What life you'll make when we were fool, the blowing note. Many case and hateful hate, look the sweat and donkey ski, God be wrong and stone on me, the blowing note.
With Beethoven, stylistically and thematically, we have aristocrats laughing at staged peasants. Moreover, it's not a reel. That's not a breathless tension that just rolls. With Burns, we have the rhythm of a wild reel and a shared rural loch. No wonder Burns, in a letter to Thomson in 1793, says the following, quote, what pleases me as simple and naive, note Schiller's word, naive, disgusts you as ludicrous and low. He says sneeringly, I know you will laugh at all this. There's a serious class division here, a self-consciousness in the Beethoven or classical orchestration that is not inherent in Burns. One perceptive critic said, well, one of the reasons was these classical composers were pandering to a rising middle-class market, and they were getting paid. Burns wasn't paid one halfpenny for any of his songs, and he didn't want a halfpenny for any of his songs. George Steiner, one of the great 20th century critics, scholars, said every language maps the world differently. Every culture maps the world differently. You cannot translate Scots traditional reel into German or Italian opera buffa. The form is lost. The close rural humour, so important to Burns, is lost. And Burns, as you would expect, comes down on the side of the fiddler rather than the librettist here. Quote, native expression, quote, national art. These are the terms Burns uses to recreate a national Scottish art out of the traditions he knows, loves, admires, sees, portrays. And how 18th century he is again in all this. For example, the Main Street Enlightenment argument of historicism, Voltaire and Montesquieu, regarding national culture, said they demanded that every nation had an irreplaceable genius that should be preserved. It was unique. These opinions and philosophical notions would go some way in Burns's emerging as a national, international artist. In his own terms, a quote, roving boy. A national composer, his term, not collector, composer, wishing paradoxically to be numbered amongst the enormous men of genius who'd come before him. He was part of an oral tradition, an indigenous fiddle and instrumental tradition. Burns the fiddler would rove up and down the country collecting tunes, creating songs from the multiplicity of the Scots tradition. A bit like Hamish Henderson, realising the multiplicity of our tradition, of which Burns was really well aware. Not only did he draw upon his dad's northeast background, his dad hadn't clapped eyes on Ayrshire until he was about 30 years old, but Burns heard northeast Scots in the house, but linguistically, culturally, musically, he draws upon that in a big way. Also, Burns did something that no self-respecting Ayrshire poet of the time we'd have done. He collected and adapted Gaelic tunes in a big way. So many of his songs are based upon Gaelic melodies. One of the best of them being MacGregor of Rora's Lament. And when I gave this song, Raven Winds, to my singer, Bobby Eaglesham, he could not believe that such a song had been lying in abeyance for 200 years. Gaelic melody, beautiful Gaelic melody.
Raven winds around her blowing, yellow leaves the woodlands strowing, by a river hoarsely roaring, Isabel straight deploring. Farewell, hours that waited measure, sunshine, days of joy and pleasure. Hail thou gloomy night of sorrow, cheerless night that knows no more.
He used even Irish tunes, provided, quote, in the Scots taste, otherwise leave it out. 'Tis rank Irish. What a cheeky sod. He loved the Irish. His sister Agnes settled in Dundalk, and I've actually spoken at the Agnes Burns cottage there. He used Irish melodies for a number of his songs. Oh, Open the Door, The Small Birds Rejoice, When Chilled November, Awa Wi' Your Witchcraft, Say Flaxen Were Her Ringlets, and his favourite love song, which was not A Fond Kiss. It was Yestreen, I Had a Pint of Wine, which he wrote to the Irish tune The Banks of Banna. And that set him off. Banks of Banna reminded him of a lassie called Anna Park, whom he impregnated. He envisages this Jew out in the wilderness waiting for his manna, his bread from heaven. He sees this lassie in his mind's eye as a sultana, not a wee raisin, but a female sultan. He uses every rhyme bar banana. Yestreen, I had a pint of wine.
Yestreen I had a pint of wine, a place where bodies sauna. Yestreen lay on this breast of mine, and gowden looks, oh Anna, the hungry Jew in wilderness, rejoicing o'er his manna, was Nathan to my any bliss upon the lips, oh Anna.
Burns went up and down the harbours of the country with his ear to the sea, listening to the Flemish, French, Russian sailors, and pinching their tunes, essentially, mixing and milling with all the Italian immigrants. And In Bonza's day, if you were Italian in Scotland, you didn't sell ice cream or run a chippy, you were probably a composer or a musician. He mixed and melded with Pietro Urbani, the Milanese, translated a song or two from Italian into Scots. He mixed with Domenico Cori, the Roman, and others. I was going to play the whole track. We'll see how time goes. Bonza's adaptation of a Russian march. Plays Ole thy loof in mine, lassie, place thy palm in mine, lassie. And I gave it quite a Ruski orchestration. You'll hear what I mean. With a sit-down sounding like a balalaika, a wee bit.
Lay thy loof in mine lass, in mine lass, in mine lass, and swear and I would hand lass, that thou wilt be mine. A slave to love's unbounded sway aft is wrought me mickle way, but now he is my deadly fay, unless thou be mine. Lay thy loof in mine lass, in mine lass, in mine lass, and swear and I would hand lass, that thou wilt be mine. 'Cause many a lass has broke my rest, that for a blink I hail it best, but thou art queen within my breast, forever to remain. Ah, lay thy love in mine lass, in mine lass, in mine lass, and swear and I would hand lass, that thou wilt be mine.
I would argue that above all, Bonza's reference to, quote, national music and native features has more to do with musical form than anything else. It has to do with Highland jigs and reels, northeast strathspeys, border slip jigs, hornpipes and double hornpipes, the very forms that Bonz, as a fiddler, was actively converting into song. In one of his most important letters, November 1792, and I won't praise the scholars for missing this quote, but I obviously didn't mean anything to them. Bonz, in fact, takes Thompson to task over the critical difference between song and poetry in relation to the simplest of Scots forms, the jig. He sends him a song, and it goes, "My wife's a wanton wee thing," line 2. "My wife's a wanton wee thing," line 3. "My wife's a wanton wee thing," at which point Thompson says, "This is crap, you know." He says, "No, it's not crap. You don't know the fundamental difference between a song and a poem." And I'll quote Bonz. He said, "There is, quote, a necessity of adapting syllables to the emphasis of what I would call the feature notes of the tune that cramps the poet." The tune cramps the poet. The tune is first. And lays him under insuperable difficulties. On farther study, I might give you something more profound, yet it might not suit the light horse gallop of the air so well as this random clink. "My wife's a wanton wee thing" is not great poetry, but it's a highly evolved Bonzian variety of mouth music based solely round the tune. It's on your sheet, you can see it there. It's the art of simple repetitions. "My wife's a wanton wee thing, my wife's a wanton wee thing, my wife's a wanton wee thing, she winna be guided by me." Or verse 1, "She played the loon or she was married, she played the loon or she," etc., etc. Good going jig. Sing along.
My wife's a wanton wee thing, my wife's a wanton wee thing, my wife's a wanton wee thing, she wanna be guided by me. She played the loon or she was married, she played the loon or she was married, she played the loon or she was married, she'll do it again or she'll die. My wife's a wanton wee thing, my wife's a wanton wee thing, my wife's a wanton wee thing, she wanna be guided by me. She held her coat and she drank it, she held her coat and she drank it, she rode herself on a blanket, she wanna be guided for me.
Here, in the reworking of instrumental music, we find the fiddler Burns obsessed with musical form as an end in itself. Its direct, naive composition in Schiller's terms, more important for Burns even than the poetry of the song. Here we have a better idea of why in his numerous letters, over 700 of them, he has such a fixation with rhythm. He talks about composing on horseback between the beats of the horse's hooves to get the rhythm of the jigs and slip jigs. Or, quote, he talks about swinging wildly on the hind legs of my elbow chair. Must have driven his wife bonkers with all this swaying on the chair to get the rhythm of the reels. Why he talks about chanting, in inverted commas, like Glenn Gould's semi-staccatos, rather than singing at the back of the throat, for the clarity of the words necessary to articulate his highly evolved mouth music. Take The Tailor, which I played a snippet from before. It's a simple story of wanton sex, being quite blunt, conveyed through the art of rhythm, interlocked alliteration, simple repetitions, and internal rhymes. It's a perfect example of Glenn Gould's semi-staccatos. Glenn Gould, by the way, looked all around the planet for somebody who could sing in an 18th century style. At the time, he said, Petula Clark is the only person I know who could sing in an 18th century fashion. It's a shame he didn't know our Scottish folk movement. The Tailor.
The tailor fell through the bed, thimble and all. The tailor fell through the bed, thimble and all. The blankets were thin and the sheets were small. The tailor fell through the bed, thimble and all. The sleepy bit lassie, she treated me ill. The sleepy bit lassie, she treated me ill. The weather was cold and the lassie lay still. She thought that the tailor could dare me ill. Oh, give me the grot again, canny young man. Oh, give me the grot again, canny young man. The day it is short and the neck that is long. The dearest seller that ever I won. There's somebody weary we lie in a lane. There's somebody weary we lie in a lane. There's some that are dowie or trow would be fain to see the bit tailor come skipping again.
The singer didn't thank me for the tempo I made him keep either. All this is vital to an understanding of Burns's approach to song. All this exemplifies musical form as an end in itself. It's a fiddler Burns obsessed with instrumental form and dance or mouth music. He looks 150 years or so ahead to the Russian formalists. That's a good name for the formalists because form's so important, like Shklovsky and Jacobson, who said poetry was a matter of sound and syntax. Burns would have said that about many of his songs. But also there's a sense in which form in Burns is not an end in itself, but as I said earlier, it's a means. The medium is the message. As I said, it's the language of music that speaks directly to us. The form, the jig, the slip jig, underpins meaning, content, and the words are an integral part of the form, as we've already seen. To offer the most obvious examples, if Burns wants to create in song a depiction of a whimsically descriptive character out of Scots folklore or nursery rhymes, he's going to use a Border's double hornpipe, because that form just conjures up the movement of an elf in this next song that he writes about. He writes a song called Wee Willie Grey about a Border's elf who goes out into the woods stark naked. Tough thing to do. He picks a willow and says, the willow will be my boots and my jacket. He picks a rose, says the rose will be my trews and my doublet. He picks a lily, says the lily will be my sark and gravet. He says the feathers o' a flea would feather up my bonnet. Now, Burns can actually visualize the movement, and we can visualize the movement of a wee elf moving like a marionette across the landscape just through the mere form. 100 or so years later, Richard Strauss, writing tone poems, program music, was trying to do the very same thing with Till Eulenspiegel and several other compositions. It's a pity he didn't have ready-made forms like this. This is what Burns heard in the borders that he liked so much. Reminded him of the movement of a wee elf. And this is what Burns actually wrote, from the tune to the song.
Wee Wally Grey and his leather wallet, Peeler Willow want to be him boots and jacket.
Wee Wally Grey and his leather wallet, Peeler Willow want to be him boots and jacket.
The rose upon the breer will be him trews and doublet. The rose upon the breer will be him trews and doublet.
The rose upon the breer will be him trews and doublet. The rose upon the breer will be him trews and doublet.
Wee Wally Grey and his leather wallet, twice a lily fleur to be him sark and cravat.
Wee Wally Grey and his leather wallet, twice a lily fleur to be him sark and cravat.
Feathers over flea with feather up his bonnet. Feathers over flea with feather up his bonnet.
The feathers of a flea with feather up his bonnet. The feathers of a flea with feather up his bonnet.
Wee Wally Grey.
If Burns wants to portray a comic tiff of lovers with rising argument, descending argument, he's going to use a Borders small pipe, single hornpipe, with its very animated running passages. Dee-dee-dee-dee-dum, dee-dee-dee-dee-dum. Flowing passage that sounds just like this on the pipes. This is what Burns would have heard. Jackie Latin, very old Borders tune. If we go to the Burns song, which is just that, oh God, you may, Sandy Brichel actually was in the audience tonight playing the box part at the start of it, making up for the pipe that's missing, sounds like this. And John Moran singing a bit of it as well.
Catchy me with Nathan, rock and reel and spin and reel a meco water basin. By a tour my good your has a hechus and a lechen, a far by my bonny cell it also a hel fechen.
Hold your tongue, you lucky lang, hold your tongue and Jonna. I held the gate till you I met, and I began to wanna. I tint my whistle and my sang, tint my peace and pleasure. But your green grass, me lucky lang, without me take my treasure.
Now, since I neglected to play Duncan Gray as we recorded it, and I talked about a reel as an unbroken, breathless tension, and you'll bear in mind what Beethoven had done with it, I will play Duncan Gray. This is John Moran, who's in the audience, actually played the citern on this one, a reel.
By Duncan Gray, the garden oat way, by Duncan Gray, the garden oat when all the lave gets here that play the diamond set the wheel and gay and check the cradle way my tay and for the garden oat. Bonnie was the lammas moon, the garden oat glower and all the hells a boon, the garden brak the bees come down. I tint my catch and bathe my shoon and Duncan year and Calvin way on the bad garden road. But Duncan, gan you keep your ease, ha ha, the garden road, as bless you way my hand must breathe, ha ha, the garden road. Duncan, gan you keep your ease, the beat again can bear us baith, and I'll Miss John will mend the skaith and clute the bad garden road.
If Buns wants to make a punchy, punctuated statement, the musical equivalent of cheekily thumbing one's nose at social conventions, he's going to use a strathspey with its gudum, diddy, gudum, dudum, a Scots snap, or the tackum as we call it on the pipe. The strathspey, which lives by fits and starts, what I said before in relation to Chopin, was the later tempo, rubato, very deliberate type of thing. Now, we've a good example here about a dance that gans our wild. Thinniel mingus bonny Mary, Thinniel mingus bonny Mary. Charlie Gregor tint his plaidy. Charlie Gregor lost his kilt, kissing Thinniel's bonny Mary. So you can imagine what sort of event that was. Incidentally, Buns had just spent the day with Neil Gow when he wrote this. The Brig, a Die, which is up in the northeast. Listen to the fits and starts.
And coming by the brig to die, a tallet we a blink to tarry as day was dawn, and in the sky we drank a health to Bonnie Mary, Thinniel mingus, Bonnie Mary, Thinniel mingus, Bonnie Mary, Charlie Gregor tint his plaidie, kissing Thinniel's Bonnie Mary. Her insie bricht, her bruisey white, her half-it logs, his bruns a berry, and nigh they dimpled way, a smile the rosy cheeks of Bonnie Mary, Thinniel mingus, Bonnie Mary, Thinniel mingus, Bonnie Mary, Charlie Gregor tint his plaidie, kissing Thinniel's Bonnie Mary. We lapped and danced a lee lang day till piper lads were way and weary, but Charlie got the spring to pay for kissing Thinniel's Bonnie Mary, Thinniel mingus, Bonnie Mary, Thinniel mingus, Bonnie Mary, Charlie Gregor tint his plaidie, kissing Thinniel's Bonnie Mary, Thinniel mingus, Bonnie Mary, Thinniel mingus, Bonnie Mary, Charlie Gregor tint his plaidie, kissing Thinniel's Bonnie Mary.
Why that was a nightmare for the Viennese composers. So we talked about the language of music. I'd like to talk about the music of language. One of Buns's answers to what Edwin Muir and Hugh MacDiarmid called the, quote, problem of language in the 18th century is wholly, I disagree with them, by the way, is wholly musical. And I have adverted to it in relation to my wife's A Wanton Wee Thing. The song, which is on your sheet, Her Daddy Forbad, Her Minnie Forbad, that's a perfect rhythm of a jig. If I want to teach wee ones jig rhythm, Her Daddy Forbad, Her Minnie Forbad, that's the rhythm of a jig. Provides a perfect illustration of Buns's use of language as sound and rhythm. In fact, the rhythm of the jig can be said to be the whole occasion for the song. Again, what Buns, you will recall, calls, quote, the necessity of adapting syllables to the emphasis of the tune, in this case, the jig. The story is a flimsy story, a sketch in 2 brushstrokes, 2 verses. A lass's parents forbid her to see Jumping John because he's a dicey rogue of a character and he only wants the lass's tucker, her dowry. But listen to what the words are doing here in perfect jig time. Her daddy forbade, her minnie forbade, conveying the lightness and daftness of the caricature of a man on the make. It's like 18th century rap if you look at it. Her daddy forbade, her minnie forbade, forbidden she wouldna be, she wouldna trow it, the bruise she brew it, brow it would taste say bitterly. Secondly, note the alliterative F's and B's and W's, hammering home in, as I say, a rap-like message that the lass is troubled, and everybody's pointing the finger at her. Forbade, forbade, forbidden, browsed, brew it, bitterly, wouldna, would. Moreover, note the use in the chorus of simple repetitions that underline the lightness and fun, and more importantly, keep the flow of the jig going. The lang la day co jumpin' John beguiled the bonny lassie. It repeats. The lang la day co jumpin' John beguiled the bonny lassie. With the second verse, we have the daft reflections on what Jumpin' John is going to get as a dowry and a description of the lassie herself. He's going to get a cow and a calf, a yow and a half a sheep, and 30 good shillings and 3. A very good talker, a cotterman's doctor, the lass with a bonny black E. Listen to the dancing interlocked alliterations, the C's and T's with a rhythmical bounce. Cow, cough, cotter, 30, 3. Note the internal rhymes, the ows, aws, e's, the short o's. They're like an internal baran. Cow, yow, cough, hoff, 3, wee, bonny, e, tocher, cotter, doctor. It's actually a postgrad at the University of Limerick said, that's pretty complex stuff. When you look at it, well, it is. The words are really a happy nonsense, and more to the point, they create the rhythm of a good-going jig. And you can sing it. It's on your sheet. Quite a nice singable tune.
Her daddy forbade, her minnie forbade, forbid she wouldn't be. She wouldn't trivet the brow, she brewed the tasty bitterly. The lang lad they go jumpin' John beguiled the bonny lassie. Ha, the lang lad they go jumpin' John beguiled the bonny lassie. A cow and a calf, a yow and a half, 30 good shillings and 3. A very good talker, the cotterman's daughter, the lass with the bonny black E. The lang lad they go jumpin' John beguiled the bonny lassie. Ah, the lang lad they go jumpin' John beguiled the bonny lassie.
I was dipping into a book in the Central Public Library in Edinburgh, a book on Schoenberg. He said he was the first person to use the human voice as an ensemble instrument, to use it instrumentally. I thought, no, I don't think so. Go back to Burns and you can hear the voice used very much as a musical instrument. Rhythm and sound. Burns argued with Thomson again and again and again as a fiddler first and a poet second. For example, his letter, September 1793, in his song, Saw You My Fiddler, he said, it's best sung, quote, as every country girl sings it, which in fact, quote, hurts the poetry, but not the air. And he said that was the important. Don't hurt the air. The tune is sacrosanct. I want to look at another aspect of Burns, Burns's approach to language. And here, again, we're not talking so much about the language of music as the music of language. The music of language. This is part of the Old Scots tradition that Burns had inherited from the Scots medieval makers. I'm going to quote a passage from Henryson, which is on your sheet. I'll quote the second verse. This is the poet's description of the plight of birds in winter in the preaching of the swallow. Van flowers fair faded we froist when fa, and birdies blithe changes their notice sweet, and still morning near slain we snaw and sleet. But lovely flowers must die with the frost, and happy birds change their sweet singing in silent mourning, nearly slain by the snow and frost. Note how the alliterative F's give us a strong feeling of the flight of birds, mainly dissyllable, two-syllable words here, fooless, flewers, faded, even froyest, which would be a dissyllable. And softer S's, by contrast, give us the feeling of the easing of the flight of the birds as winter overpowers them. More monosyllables here, slowing down the bird's flight. Sweet, still, sweet, slain, snaw, sleet. And note the heavy alliteration slows down the second half of the passage for more reflective statement about the changing fate of the birds. The bogging down in F's, B's and S's, flewers, fair, faded, froist, far, etc. I'd like to take a Bunsen example, which I could spend an hour talking about, but I don't have an hour. Ken ye what Meg of the mill has gotten? a song that should be better known. Burns's theme in the song is love versus greed. A lassie Meg prefers the wealthy laird to the honest, gentle miller. Let's look at how sound equals sense in Burns, just like it does in Henryson. That is how the actual sound of the words underlines the point that the poet is making. For example, the sound is very sharp, harsh, in relation to his description of the mercenary Meg or the wealthy laird, both obsessed with money and material goods, and it's very soft and gentle in a description of the honest, loving miller. Verse 1, note the harsh K's, T's, and G's in describing Meg and her action. Ken, broken, whit, gotten, clout, hurt. By contrast with the loving miller, the description is gentle. We have liquid flowing L's. Miller, laird, lady. I could go on and on, but I won't. The song speaks for itself. Burns in the song also uses various registers of Scots, and that's the subject of another lecture. You can bring me back.
Oh, ken ye what Meg o' the Mill has gotten? And ken ye what Meg o' the Mill has gotten? She's gotten a coof wi' a clout o' siller, and broken the heart o' the barley miller. The miller was strapping, the miller was ruddy, a heart like a lord and a hue like a lady. The laird was a wee diffil blear at Norrell. She's left a gate fallow and taken a churl. The miller he hecht her a heart leal and lovin'. The laird did address her, we met her mere movin'. A fine pacing horse, wi' a clear chain at bridle, a whip by her side and a bonny side saddle. Away on the cellar it is sae prevailing, and way on the love that is fixed on a mailin'. A talker's nae word in a true lover's parle, but gie me my love and a beg on the world.
Well, an example of what I'll call Scoto-English, some folk call it lightly tipped Scots verse, the song that everybody knows very well, My Love's Like a Red, Red Rose. We find Burns's use of sound as sense conjuring up so effectively the feeling, the sense of what he's describing so simply. If you look at the words, they look awful on the page, they look trite, they look like platitudes. And Burns achieves his great effect primarily through the music of language, with all those monosyllables in My Love's Like a Red, Red Rose. Oh, my love's like a red, red rose, etc. That's his theory of ballad simplicity. That creates a type of chant throughout. It's a type of tone poem, if you like. He uses, as I say, well-worn metaphors, but in his hands, they're wholly fresh and convincing. They're enchanting. We're enchanted, enticed by the sound of the words rather than by the literal meaning or seeming oversimplification. Here, the character of the song uses a metaphor to express his gentle feelings of love for the lassie. For example, lines 3 and 4. He compares his true love to, quote, a melody sweetly played in tune. And if you look at Burns's words, all are like a gentle melody. Long E's. Verse 1, melody, sweetly. Verse 2, bonny, deep, thee, dear, sees. Verse 3, sees, dear, thee, dear. Verse 4, thee, wheel, thee, wheel. There's the music of all that. That is the gentle melody. And every line of the song has long, liquid, flowing, gentle L's. Verse 1, loves like newly, melody sweetly played. Verse 2, lost, love, will, love, still, till, and so on. The other thing, we have constantly repeated phrases, what the Greeks called anaphora, that emphasize his point and itself verbally create a musical chant running through the entire song. Verse 1, oh my love's like, oh my love's like. That's newly, that's sweetly. Verses 2 and 3, and I will love thee still, and I will love thee still, till a' the seas gang dry, till a' the seas gang dry, etc. Before I close with my last analysis, which will be Auld Lang Syne, I'd like to say thanks very much to the Royal Society of Edinburgh for inviting me to give this lecture. Thanks to the chair, Professor Edward, I believe, for stepping in. Thanks to Una Carroll, who organised this event. She's the midwife at the event, very much so. Thanks to the man, Mihal, on sound and lights. Thank him as well. And thanks very much to all the great musicians of our Scots folk movement, which is a bit of an elite club of its own. Including my sound engineer, who couldn't be here tonight, Richard Werner. And thanks to your good selves for turning out. So, I'll take a few minutes to talk about Auld Lang Syne, literally, old long since or old times past. A musical masterpiece said to be collected by Burns, but he did not collect it. His hallmarks are all over it. Also, it's sign, not worldwide sign. It just, never mind. It's a simple story set in a house, in a pub, pints and horn, some reflections on friendship. But Burns has two serious objectives here. One is he wants to make a universal statement about human brotherhood. Secondly, he wants to make a more intimate statement about what the Scottish experience of brotherhood should be. How does he achieve high seriousness in such a simple story? How does he make a universal statement? He uses all the musical tools at his disposal: rhythm, rhetorical pattern, chanting, sound equals sense. He uses a conflation of Scots dialects and neoclassical English, the English of the King James Bible and on. Ralph Waldo Emerson said it was the only example in history of a language made classic by the genius of a single man. He's not far wrong there. Rhythmically, Burns uses monosyllables, as with My Love's Like a Red, Red Rose, to stop the rhythmical flow, so we're forced to reflect on each word. For Auld Lang Syne, ma, jo, for Auld Lang Syne, we'll tack a 109 words, 102 monosyllables. Now you can argue that words like auld and lang become disyllables when sung, but those are very much the exception to Burns's rule, and in a way only accentuate the effect of his monosyllables. Secondly, he uses end-stop words and lines to stop the flow again, to make us reflect on the words and lines. Note the end-stop T's and P's. Verse 1, forgot. Hard T appears twice. Auld acquaintance be forgot. Auld acquaintance be forgot. The chorus, which runs between the verses, hovers on the word yet, which doesn't have the same connotations in Scots as it does in English, but I won't go into that. Tak a cup o' kindness yet. In verse 2, we have the pint stout, hard P, hard T, the drink that they'll share together, and that important word yet. Tak a cup o' kindness yet. Verse 5, we have the wacht, the drink, the ged willy wacht, the drink that they'll share together. So you see we have several emphatical end-stop lines. Burns, thirdly, uses anaphora, rhetorical repetition, to create a serious intonement running through the entire song, almost biblical. It's like something out of the King James Bible in its serious intonation. Think of these familiar lines from Ecclesiastes, Old Testament. To everything there is a season and a time to every purpose under the heaven, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to kill and a time to heal, etc. Notice those intoning repetitions. To every, a time to, a time to, a time to. It gives us an hypnotic chant. Makes us stop and reflect on the seriousness of the words. Let's look at Auld Lang Syne in these terms, which is full of anaphora, constant rhetorical repetitions. Verse 1, should auld acquaintance be forgot? Should auld acquaintance be forgot? 2 repetitions. Chorus, for Auld Lang Syne, for Auld Lang Syne, for Auld Lang Syne. Verses 3 and 4 come as a pair. So we have we twa hey, but from but weave, but sees, sin auld lang syne, sin auld lang syne. Verse 5 is really like Ecclesiastes, and from and theirs, and geese, and wheel. These are all techniques the poet uses to give a monumental or biblical quality to his verse. At the same time, how does he achieve an intimate personal statement? How does he make a unique Scottish statement? He uses an unusual literary language, as I said, composed of various dialects of Scots, Old English, Neoclassical English, the English of the King James Bible. I'll cite one example. His last verse. And there's a horn, my trusty fear, and geese a horn of thine, and we'll tak a recht ged willy wach for Auld Lang Syne. That is a linguistic hybrid that only Burns could ever have created. Trusty fear, not on your life in Scotland. Trusty, people make a joke, my trusty sword. It's not used. One would have said leal in Burnside, not trusty. Fear is an archaic Scots word he would have got from Barbers Bruce. In Burns' day, he would have said leal freen, not trusty fear. Why does Burns use those words? He wants the monumental quality, the high seriousness, trusty fear of 2 archaic words, one Elizabethan English, one Old Scots. And then there's that outrageous geese a horn of thine. Can you hear a giner and Leith? Geese a horn of thine. I don't think, nobody ever said that in geese your horn in dialect, you would say. But again, Burns wants the monumental quality, so he uses that biblical, and it was used in Scots dialect in the old days, before Burns, thine, which gives him a different quality. And that old Miltonic construction, John Milton was his favourite English poet. Not even geese thine horn, but geese a horn o' thine. So you have intimate touches, Scots dialect, geese a horn, and the high seriousness of that biblical, archaic Scots thine. Then we have the ged willywach, which sounds quite Scots, but it's really Old English rather than Old Scots. It's from Lidget. And earlier we have the cup of kindness, which is, of course, neoclassical English. So we have quite a mix of registers of Scots and English for the special effect that Burns wants. Similarly, in verses 2, 3 and 4, Burns mixes colloquial Scots, quite broad Scots, with very conscious poetic use of language. Since his descriptions are about the intimacy of friendship of the past, he uses very colloquial Scots. We twa hae rin aboot the braes and pu'd the gowans fine, but we wanted money a weary fit, sin auld lang syne. We twa hae paidled the burn, from morning sun till dine, but seas atween us braid hae roared, sin auld lang syne. It's colloquial Scots, aye, but look, as with Red Rose, at the music of the vowel sounds, the A's, E's, I's and O's, the smoothness of the vowels, and the music of the vowels evokes his positive feeling for the past. Sound equals sense. Hey, aboot, braes, fine, weary, lang, sign, paidle. Every word has a long vowel sound. It's Burns all right. Again, it's almost like an intonation here. Note too, it's not a particular scene, and that's deliberate. It's a generalised painting of a landscape. It's not Ye Banks and Braes of Bonnie Doon. It's not Bonnie Doon. It's not Craigieburn Wood. He doesn't say where it is. It's Scottish, but it's everywhere, and that's so the whole planet can inhabit that particular landscape in friendship. Thirdly, like the old ballads, the whole of time is compressed within that song. All time exists within the space of it. He has at least 3 time frames going in Auld Lang Syne. 1, the sense of the timeless, with an opening rhetorical question, that philosophical probing. Should old acquaintance be forgot? In other words, is that the way of things? We just forget friendships. We don't give a damn about friendships. That's timeless. That's philosophical. Verses 3 and 4, he reflects on the simple past. When he and his mate were young, they ran about the braes, they paidled i' the burn. That's the simple past. The timeless, the simple past. And there's more. Verses 2 and 5, we have the present, the here and now. The one verse where he maintains that they should both buy a drink and toast friendship. The other where they grasp hands in friendship in the present time. The timeless, the simple past, the present. Also, as I mentioned, with the monumental, and I'm winding to a conclusion, monumental language used, the hand clasp becomes a symbol of brotherhood for all time. So it's the present and it's forever. And if nothing else, that's the point that people have taken right round the world when they grasp their hands in friendship. The only problem being, and this is a hobby horse of mine, it's sung universally to the wrong tune. I spent the evening talking about how form is meaning in Burns. Now, this is very important. Burns did use that tune that we know for Auld Lang Syne, but the only time he used it, because it's a reel, which just flows like that, he used it for a song about impotence. O Can You Labour Lee?
Can you labour Lee, young man, oh can you labour Lee? Get back the gate ye came again, yes never scorn me. I feed a man at Martinmas where all pennies 3, but all the fault I had to him,
he couldn't labour Lee, he couldn't manage. Burns used a reel, because the reel is a breathless tension. She's accusing him over and over again. The reel has a flow. They're all close intervals in that song. There's nothing beyond a perfect fourth, 4 notes apart. If you look at the melody he used for Auld Lang Syne, it's not a reel, it's an air. The whole space, it has leaps. It has leaps of a major and a minor 6 musically. 9 semitones, major 6. 8.5 semitones, minor 6. The minor 6, moreover, and Burns knew this fine because he knew his music inside and out, in the Middle Ages and slightly beyond, was reflective. It had a reflective meaning. It was considered a dissonance for a long time, something slightly moving. It's why even Love Story in the recent years starts with a minor 6. Auld Lang Syne excerpt right here where I talk a tiny bit about it, not much. Chorus of Auld Lang Syne demonstrating major 6 and minor 6. Major 6. Minor 6. Reflective. That's why he uses it. That's why it's the right tune for Auld Lang Syne. It's the last thing that we'll do. Please feel free to sing it. And this is the way we should be singing it.
Should old acquaintance be forgot and never brought to mind? Should old acquaintance be forgot and old lang syne? For old lang syne, my Jo, for old lang syne, we'll take a cup o' kindness yet for old lang syne, and surely he'll be your pint stoop, and surely I'll be mine, and we'll take a cup o' kindness yet for old lang syne, for old lang syne, my Jo, for old lang syne, we'll take a cup o' kindness yet for old lang syne. Which way run about the braes and put the gowans pine, but we've wandered many a weary fit sin old lang syne. Aye, which way fiddled in the burn fae morning sun till dine, but seas between us brady road sin old lang syne. For old lang syne, my Jo, for old lang syne, we'll take a cup o' kindness yet for old lang syne. And there's a hand more trusty fear, and gaze a hand o' thine, and we'll take a ragged whirly walk for old lang syne.
Burns was a fiddler and poet who saved much of the entire national instrumental and dance tradition via his song. He did so bravely, he did so defiantly. In a letter to Thomson of 26 October 1792, he said the following, and I quote him: "I've long ago made up my mind as to my own reputation in the business of authorship, and have nothing to be pleased or offended at in your adoption or rejection of my verses." Try saying that to your publisher next time you want something published. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks very much. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, wasn't that great? Now, we haven't got long, so who would like to ask a question? That lady in the pink, there.
Catherine Smith, I'm the author of the biography, The Stars of Robert Burns, and this whole theme of music has been a central part of that book. Do you have a view as to whether we are in risk of seeing Burns as having preserved a language which did not exist, given that it was this hybrid language, and overlooking his preservation of the music, since we focus very much on the so-called lalans of Burns, with all the music too often being lost?
There are two sides to this. One is Burns did very much preserve a good deal of Scots language, spoken Scots language, which is there very direct. At the same time, he's a poet, and he operated like any poet in any country in the world. i.e. creating the language of poetry. So he's like a painter using every shade of green under the sun. He's not going to say, oh, I'm not going to use that shade of green, that doesn't belong to our culture. He would use, as a poet, whatever he chose. So he kept both things going. There's a great deal of spoken Scots in there. If you listen to one of the songs I played tonight, Ken You What Mega the Mill has broken, you'll see in that, Gotten rather, you'll see a good deal of spoken Scots in that. Also a good deal of high register of Scots, words like hecht and what have you, which he preserved at the same time. The musical side is, he's a character larger than life. And so you've got the musical side, which must be revered because it's amazing. Even, I shouldn't say even, that's condescending, but there was a chappie at St Andrews University called Cecil Davies, who was a specialist in Schubert. And he didn't care very much for Burns at all until he started studying him. And he said, my God, he's more creative than Schubert. That was his conclusion. So, no, that's very important. At the same time, the language side, but we must look at what he did, what he achieved, and differentiate. Everything is not just spoken Scots in there. Some of it is a hybrid, some of it's purely poetical, some of it's pure dialect, as he would have heard it, spoken it. Some of it's northeast. He uses a good deal of northeast. Aints crowdy, not yints. Aints crowdy, twice crowdy, 3 times crowdy in a day, and etc. He uses northeast. He uses, for instance, the Ayrshire pronunciations like grun. Well, if Burns is writing a pastoral song, he's not going to use grun. He's going to use grun, which he does from the northeast more because it's more mellifluous. So whereas if he's writing a song about somebody who's dreadful, like sick a wife as well as wife, I wouldn't gie a button for her. I mean, he's going to use the strongest, most pointed words he possibly, and it's going to be gid, not guid. From the northeast, not good even. It's going to be gid. It's going to be harder. It's a subtle use, but he is a poet and a songwriter. So all the sides must be looked at and considered. I'm not desperately concerned about whether in putting the music forward, we're trying to overshadow one side. All the sides can be looked at, but they should be looked at with due regard. That's what I'm concerned about.
Anne McClary. First, I'd like to say I wish we'd had you as a tutor on the folk degree at Newcastle.
Thanks very much.
My question is, how would you respond to the school of thought that believes that My Love is Like a Red, Red Rose was also collected?
Was also collected?
Yeah.
There's certain, you see, you've got some song. Normally he didn't collect songs per se, and he says that even about notice when he was talking about Auld Lang Syne. Even he said his marked songs with Z, meaning that only the chorus is ancient, says he, in a very pocky way. But there are some songs, yes, that he collected bits, but he transformed them as a composer, his term, almost beyond recognition, and because he was a recreator. That was his contribution to the tradition. Traditions are either fossilized or they keep flowing along, and that was Burns's contribution to maybe, even with a song where some of the words were there, is to collect a bit of, and then to add his particular bit of creativity to it. So that wouldn't upset me, somebody saying that. And I deliberately didn't play the melody of My Love's Like a Red, Red Rose because I get embroiled in argument and discussion and all. It's bad enough Auld Lang Syne. I put that one on, that one it upsets people to no end. And even, the a bit iconoclastic, I suppose, in my portrayal of, I played Bach and Beethoven, Haydn, all the stuff from the age of 4 on the piano. And I revere them as great classical composers, but I don't think they could do absolutely everything. They were not rocket scientists, and they couldn't write strathspeys either. So, that's an important thing to bear in mind. Yeah, yes, yeah. You'll need a mic.
And one there, and that'll have to be it.
I think you've revealed tonight quite a number of aspects of Burns' work that perhaps would be could regard as not widely known. One which surprised me was the ability to translate into Scots from Italian.
Yes.
Do you know if he would have done this directly without any need for an intermediate stage conventional English?
Burns could have done it. Burns, yes, apparently he did do it. Burns wouldn't have been a fluent Italian speaker. No, he wasn't a fluent French speaker either, but he had a good smattering. He was an avid self-educator, and I mean, he had an immense background. If you go through his letters, you see all, I mean, he read till his eyeballs were falling out, basically. I mean, his copy of Adam Smith's Wealth of Nation and Adam Ferguson, I mean, there's some, and Rousseau and Voltaire and Diderot, and I mean, it's larger than any of the undergraduates I taught on the English course at Edinburgh University. Nobody had the background that Burns had. Absolutely not. They wouldn't have pretended to have that background either. They would have been daft to do so. But yes, he would have translated the Italian quite directly, and he did mix and meld with these characters. He was really very interested in what they did. He liked certain Baroque composers, not classical so much, because he didn't like the way they was going. I tried to point that out. For instance, he liked Handel, he liked Corelli. So he was, and Domenico Corri would have been his cup of tea, because Domenico Corri is responsible for what I'll call pedagogy in Scotland on piano. If you listen to the early Battlefield Band, Alan Reid's parts are straight Clementi sonatinas, which are from Domenico Corri. I could go on and on. Dear me, yes. But a good question, though.
Kathleen Davey, Vice President, Ayrburns Club. We strive very, very hard in Ayrshire to get the word of our bard through to the children in a lasting way.
Yeah.
Would you say that the language of music of Burns was a lasting way to keep these people in love with our bard?
I would, very much so. The music is so accessible. I've never seen a bairn, a wee one, listen to the music, listen to especially the jigs and all. I mean, not only in Scotland, even in Ireland, where some of them don't understand many of the words, who didn't respond to that music instantaneously. It has an immediate effect, and then they get interested. And even I've done a fair deal of work in places like Barra and Eriskay, and I remember wee ones with me, and I had them singing all sorts of songs in Scots, and the wee one said, in your land, he said, in your land, says he, what is the word for a child? I said, a bairn. So he said, I like that word, bairn. I like that. And he's mentioning bairn to everybody, you know. I mean, it's just you can learn it. The music is so accessible. It's a way forward. And it shouldn't be just done for Burns Day, Burns Night, Burns Month. Oh, dear. I mean, he's a man for all seasons. And that's very important. Very important.
We'll maybe poach you for a wee visit to the schools.
That's fine. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
One more? Any more?
I found the last one. I just want to thank you very much for two things. Firstly, behind you, that compendium has brought lots of songs to our attention we would never have heard before. And the second thing is that I was brought up, and the only way to hear Burns was through Kenneth McKellar and Moira Anderson in that tradition. And now we have another tradition. And I think the work that you're doing and all the singers have managed to bring a different tradition, which has really brought Burns to life. And thank you very much.